Well, welcome back, everyone. Tonight, we're here in Ottawa. I am with my colleague Celine Gallus. Celine, how are you doing?
Doing so good today, William. How are you?
Pretty tired. It was a long day hearing lengthy testimonies
hmm
by Transport Canada witnesses, by CBSA, Canadian Border Service Agency witnesses as well. Well, one witness from CBSA. So it was a pretty long day. I'm here to my left also by Eva Chipiak, lawyer for Freedom Corp. Eva, how are you doing?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I think that you were sitting in the stand the whole day today throughout the whole procedures. I just want to get your thoughts on what your general impression of the day was, and then we can get into what went on yesterday during Commissioner Brenda Lucky from the RCMP's testimony.
Yeah, well, honestly, today I wasn't too incredibly impressed with the witness panels we had. We had first CBSA, the president of the Canadian Border Services Agency, and he said that they have an intelligence and an enforcement agency. But under cross again with Brendan Miller, it was confirmed that he has no say in whether or not the Emergencies Act should be invoked. So scratch that, on to the next. And then we had Transport Canada, and we heard a lot of projections and lots of talking from the Transport Canada about fear of investment and decline in how much was being the border was being affected by these blockades. Lots of ifs, what ifs, and all these not real committed answers. And then under cross-examination with Brendan Miller, like, he sets everybody straight so quickly, which is what I love. And so first thing he showed was there was already an email that was sent to Omar Al-Jabra. I hope I got that right.
Well, we always call him
Nobody knows.
Al-Jabra, but it's Al-Gabra, I
Okay,
think. But
Marco Mendicino and Melanie Jolie. And you know what, like, to some extent, I'm with Brendan about these people's names. Like, they don't talk to us. I think they're in this like bubble. Like, why should I care about their names? I'm getting to that feeling today. I'm a bit frustrated, so it's coming out. So they're emailed on this email saying that Arrive Can is causing insane problems and pressures on the border. And here we have these two high officials from the Transport Canada going on for 2 hours about how the blockades that went on for 3 weeks, not even in Windsor, it was a few days.
It was a few days.
It was a few trucks. We're not stupid. Like, let's look at the real evidence and not your fears and what you thought would have been. And he even said that, oh, we were able to secure billion-dollar investments from these 4 companies. So clearly, like, if we actually look at evidence today, it was just, I'm getting to like my boiling point here, that these bureaucrats I don't know who they're being servants to. It's definitely not the Canadian people. So for what I was saying is there was clear evidence that Arrive Can was causing a lot of the issues on the border blockade, border problems, not the protesters. They had no evidence to justify it. And then there was also, second thing that came up was stats, and you could see that it didn't actually change. And no recognition for it. So they're just up there with some political talking points, zero evidence. This is an inquiry. This is about evidence, and that's what we're here for.
It was exhausting. Honestly, it was very exhausting. And I kind of apologize to the people that were following my live tweeting today, but like, to go and to try and explain all of the lengths that they were going to absolutely confirm all the things that we know and then backpedal and just give absolute irrelevant information for hours was insane. So I didn't want to just pollute my live tweets with, these are the statistics that didn't change, that won't change, that haven't changed. These are all of their excuses. And when last name Dea, the chief economist for Transport Canada, when he was speaking on and on and on, like, I even saw that the lawyers were cutting him off because he was just going on endlessly. He was taking all of these tangents and just diverting from the topic at times. It was exhausting to watch and to try and pay attention. It was very, very dry. And as you just said, Brendan Miller set them straight pretty fast, regardless of the fact that he had like this much time in comparison to the other lawyers that cross-examined those two gentlemen today.
Yeah, and there's one thing that Eva said. I just want to show exactly what she was talking about. When you were talking about the ArriveCan app and the borders, the issues at the border, if we can pull up the tweet that I just sent exactly. So here's the evidence that was shown in front of the committee today. If we can zoom in on, I believe, the third paragraph, it states in custom, if we can just zoom in on the third paragraph, if possible. In customs basis figures for February, trade activity by road transport at these border crossings fell 8.8% compared with February 2021, with the Ambassador Bridge and Coutts crossings posting the largest declines. However, and this is the important part, increased trade activity was observed at other crossings near the ones that were blocked, partly offsetting the decline in traffic. So, and finally, overall, the blocked border crossings appear to have had little impact on the aggregate values of Canadian imports and exports in February.
Yeah.
I mean, this shows that the fact that the borders were blocked didn't have a lot of impact, and it says it itself.
But here's the thing, though, they weren't really blocked. They were temporarily blocked in one part. They usually kept a lane open, and beyond that there were other boarding crossings that they always went through. No one actually stopped people from being able to go between the border crossings. This came out how many weeks ago from multiple people. I mean, even the mayor of Coutts, Andrew Dilkins, he admitted openly that you could get through. You know, they had negotiations going.
And if you actually look at the transcript, I think what you'll see is there was a lot of, we felt like it would affect the borders.
That's right.
And we had 2 hours of that, and you could set that straight in 2 seconds.
2 seconds, yeah.
That document.
Yeah.
So, and then one other thing I have to say that's getting to a bit of my boiling point is we heard so much about resources, lack of resources. I'd like to see what the budgets are for Transport Canada, CBSA, RCMP. If they have billion-dollar budgets and they can't figure out how to deal with a 3-week protest of Canadians, and let me tell you what is free: talking to the protesters, talking to Canadians. I think we've just gone so far. We're so overregulated. We've got way too many agencies. Nobody knows what anybody is doing. Everyone's pointing the finger at the other guy. And here we are. And what are they complaining about? Resources. So they just want more and have no answers. That's where I'm at today.
100%. And like, it was also openly admitted that there was a lot of, this was, what's his first name? Keenan. I live tweet. Michael Keenan. I live tweet only using the last name. So Michael Keenan and first name of the other guy, Christian Dea. They both admitted that all 3 levels of the government 100% did not collaborate with each other and were in utter chaos, essentially. So why didn't they go and talk to protesters? This was even before the convoy arrived in Ottawa, even before the Coutts blockade took place, even before the one in Windsor took place, 100% what was being strewn across the internet was that we're coming. This is what's happening. This is why they want to talk to a federal government employee, anyone from the federal government, anyone, because as I recall, that was because it was a really safe bet based on how our country is regulated, that the provincial government would follow through regardless of what the federal government mandated or didn't. But there was never a stream of dialogue that was open. Literally, I honestly can't even fathom that nobody was like, oh, we really want this to stop. Oh, we've got all these toolboxes and all these things in our arsenals that, we're going to use, we can use them. No one talked to anybody. It's like if it's like they couldn't even see what was going on. Like they were just blindly running around pretending like they had no options to exhaust except to literally hit the panic button, which is the Emergencies Act. I'm getting very frustrated as well, sitting there and being like, I want to bring the news to people. I want to be able to tell that side of the story. I can't wait for next week.
And to your point, I think a little bit more to Eva's point as well, that's the same government that has trouble running passport offices. When we talk about federal incompetence and government incompetence, that's the same government that has trouble properly running simple passport office. That's our Canada right now. But what we're talking, exhausting resources, and I think that's a great segue into, I promised yesterday we would talk about Brenda Lucki. I think that's a great segue to Brenda Lucki's testimony. We did not exhaust all of our resources. Brenda Lucki yesterday stated that, let me just find the exact quote. She stated that it is her view that we have not yet exhausted all of the resources available, and that the Ontario emergency measures would provide more resources. Brenda Lucki said that, what does it say to you as a lawyer who's trying to show how it was not right, it was not justified to invoke the Emergencies Act, that a commissioner of the RCMP goes out, one that loves Justin Trudeau, goes out and says it is her view we had not used all of our resources?
Yeah, well, who cares what I think as a lawyer? As a Canadian, I think that's just wrong. She did say that, and then nonchalantly during her evidence, she just says, yeah, I guess we could have talked to the protesters.
Like,
yes.
Yes, fists.
Exactly.
Like,
well, when you're saying that over and over, we have all these toolboxes, and even she was saying de-escalation is very important. So why didn't you enact any of these tools that you have at your disposal? Are Canadians really that scary to talk to? They were in the room with you yesterday. Just talk to Canadians.
Yeah. No one is.
Yeah.
No one's saying anything, and they're still really not talking. I mean, they're under oath, but I mean, Brenda Lucki, if you didn't see most of her testimony or any of the clips that we've cut, she really, for the most part, forgot to recall very general information that is her job to be able to know and to understand. This is the commissioner for the RCMP in Canada. How is this going on?
Yeah.
Well, she didn't talk to people. And then it turns out as well that nobody asked for her opinion on February 13th, which is incredibly telling and actually frightening.
Yes.
Because if we know 100% CSIS said that there is no threat to justify the Emergencies Act. And then on February 13th, when there was a call and Brenda Lucki was involved, nobody asked the top police officer for Canada for their opinion.
Very telling.
And she didn't volunteer to say her opinion either. And she's an RCMP commissioner. She said, I wasn't asked, and I decided not to say anything. That's very telling of the type of person she is. Just to move on to a little bit more from Brenda Lucki, because we only have you on for 13 minutes, and then it's going to be you and I is going to talk about today's testimony. Let's show clip number 1. Brenda Lucki answering one of my questions. I had a chance to ask her 2 questions afterwards, and then I'll ask you some more of your thoughts from a legal perspective of Brenda Lucki's testimony. So let's just take a look at clip number 1. You said that the Emergencies Act was the safest option and that you couldn't have done what you did without it. But you didn't say that it was necessary, though. Is there a reason why you didn't say it was necessary?
It's not up to me to decide if it's necessary or if it meets the threshold. It's about, will it be useful to law enforcement? Is there any gaps or any problems if we were trying to enforce it? I thought it was useful. I thought it was needed. Now, obviously, I have the benefit of hindsight. We wouldn't have been able to do the enforcement actions as safe as we did. We wouldn't have been able to keep the people at that protest as safe as they were, and it wouldn't have been concluded in the short time frame it was if it wasn't for the emergency.
But just the audacity, really, in hindsight, like, you're not capable of making decisions that aren't even, there was a buildup to the EA. So we're being led to believe, at least, it wasn't just something that was like, we need to decide in 3 seconds if we're going to invoke this Emergencies Act. This was talked about before, prior to. Actually, I know for a fact they talked about it on the 10th of February between the deputy ministers meeting. So in hindsight, like, you had days to think about this. I'm sure Justin Trudeau had from the moment he heard about the convoy to the 14th to think about it, and he still went forward with it. So why do we have people in a position of leadership that aren't capable of making calls when it is their job to be able to protect Canadians to the best of their ability? And she showed her incompetence. But why do you think that this is happening in this country?
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that, but just watching what she responded to, it was like a circle of information. It was not clear at all. She started with the right answer, saying that it's not for her to suggest or justify whether or not the Emergencies Act is necessary. And that's correct. CSIS is the only one that should do that. But then when she goes on and saying, well, it was helpful and it was needed, well, why didn't you talk to the federal government about that on February 13th? Because we know you didn't. Yeah. how does that affect anything when you're not the one to make the call? So what is she saying? Hindsight is 2020. When I rewatched that clip just now, it actually became more confusing. It's like she's trying to confuse the public. She's trying to confuse Canadians. And that is so improper on so many levels. Again, I'm taking it back to the OPP officers and the commissioner of the OPP. You should get straight, clear, and competent answers from policing authorities. I have no idea what she said after watching that the second time.
Of course, well, that's all that's all their tactics. You say a bunch of words and you don't mean anything. We see liberal politicians do that all the time in all of their press conference. That's Justin Trudeau's favorite tactic. But looking back at Brenda Lucky's testimony, I'm curious about that though. You said that it was only CSIS' responsibility to decide whether or not the Emergencies Act was necessary. It was only their responsibility to look at whether or not the threshold under Section 2 was actually met. So just out of curiosity, what is everyone else doing here at the commission if it's not CSIS?
Yeah, you know, and I think that's what we're getting at with some of Brendan's questions, because that was the last question he had to the CBSA agent. Okay, and that's why I said next. That is a very good question. And he did put that to somebody, I think yesterday. He was like, so was there any agency or any enforcement agency that suggested that you needed the Emergencies Act? I really am having a hard time. And this is why I'm feeling a little bit bad for Canadians that, again, looking at the budgets of these departments and agencies, and I don't know why they're here. I don't think they know why they're here.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I think this has just become a big, what's that, the board game where like you're trying to figure out the mystery and you don't know like who did it. What is that? Clue?
Clue. Yeah.
I wish that the Canadian government would get a clue, by the way. But seriously, like in regards to her testimony, it's very confusing. Yeah. Right? It's very confusing. And then what she says off record is even more confusing. I feel like my life has become kind of like a psyop in a way. Like all this information from these people that I grow up and I learn that I'm supposed to trust because they're going to make the decisions to protect me. I don't feel very protected as a Canadian.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't want to leave it on a super negative note here. I do want to leave it on a positive note. And what I do hope that this actually brings to light for Canadians, that we just have to be way more involved in our government, in politics, so that we don't get blindsided like this again. Because now I think this inquiry is great so that we could really see where the competency is, where the incompetency is as well. And we know we have to really take part in these democratic processes and be involved.
Yeah, just continue on Brenda Lucky. Let's show clip number 2, which is another part of my testimony. Not my testimony, sorry, my interview with her during the media scrum. Another question that I asked her. Let's take a look at that. You said during your testimony that you didn't know if you needed a court order to seize the bank accounts as freeze asset.
The act wasn't seizing, right? No. The act was freezing. Oh. I don't know if that changes anything.
I think that's a legal question.
Yeah, but I'm not sure.
Is there a reason why you weren't aware that you needed a court order to do that?
No, the seizing, I knew that you needed a court order. I wasn't sure on the freezing because we've never done the freezing of accounts. We obviously, when we seize accounts, that's a different aspect, but the freezing was pretty new to me and I haven't looked at it any further.
And that goes a little bit to what you were saying earlier about her not knowing that you were supposed to have a court order to seize bank accounts, freeze assets.
Well, you're the top law enforcement person in Canada. So it's really embarrassing that you don't know what the law is.
I think that's the whole thing, embarrassing. I think that's the word to describe Brenda Lucky. And there's also another thing that came out during her testimony. She's not the one that said it, but it still came out during her testimony. There's a picture that I sent about notes that were taken. If we could put that up on the screen, notes that were taken about what Bill Blair said during perhaps a meeting, perhaps a call. It's a note where you see some yellow highlighting, some blue highlighting. All right, let's zoom in on the yellow highlighting, because that's the important part. And you might have some issue reading what is written, but I was able to depict it. So if we can zoom in a little bit. All right, so it's Minister Blair. So that's what Minister Blair said. It says, despite throwing Ottawa under the bus, praising OPP for the work at Windsor, which probably means the Windsor blockades, the Windsor protests that were there. And when he refers to Ottawa police, when he refers to Ottawa, he means the Ottawa police. And that was made clear during the testimony yesterday. So, I mean, what are we supposed to understand from that, from what Minister Bill Blair said about throwing Ottawa under the bus, throwing the OPP under the bus, effectively throwing Peter Slowly under the bus, and praising the OPP?
Well, yeah, you just see that these people aren't working together. So here they are, and you said this, Celine, earlier, nobody's working together on any levels, yet they're all crying for more resources. Maybe the OPP didn't. That might have been one of the agencies that hasn't. But everyone else is saying that. But it's really a clear lack of confidence in one another, working together. And again, it's just shameful for Canada to have to witness this on a national scale.
Yeah, no, for sure. I totally agree with you. I'm not sure what else, honestly, I have to add to it. Like, I really do entirely agree with what you just said. I stand with you there. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there another thing that we haven't touched on regarding Brenda Lucky's testimony? I just think would be relevant for our viewers at home to know about what she had to say. Or do you think we did everything?
I think we did a pretty good analysis.
Yeah, so basically showed the incompetency, showed an embarrassment that Brenda Lucky is.
She did it all herself. Let's be honest. She really did.
Brenda Lucky goes to bed early. We also learned
her
that.
Her bedtime's 10 p.m. Yeah, keep that in mind. Yeah.
She went to bed early during what was supposed to be a national threat, to national security
movement.
Yeah,
what?
Exactly.
What is going on?
And no one's working together. All right, from today's testimony, Brendan's cross-examination, we saw at some point. So he was supposed to cross-examine the witness first, the two witnesses first. But then as he was coming on the stand, the government of Canada objected to him cross-examining the witness. I don't think that we have the clip, but I know that's what happened the first time, which is why then he cross-examined afterwards. Why did that happen?
Okay, so the rules that the commission has set up is that 2 days before you're cross-examining a witness, you're asked to put the documents. You have to email the documents that you're going to put to the witness, possibly. So 2 days before any witness, we're doing that by 5 o'clock. And the commission has given a bit of leeway on that. But what is incredibly frustrating here is that the government of Canada has been they've been doing a data dump on all parties. And there's been thousands of documents in the last few days, excuse me, being uploaded. I have to talk.
Okay, let's switch.
We can get you some water. So basically there were a lot of documents that the government of Canada sent to all the parties extremely late in the commission. From I think what was seen, it was close to 3,000 documents that were sent pretty late.
Which is crazy.
So that's a lot of documents. And then Brendan Miller, from what was said by the government of Canada today, while the initial examination was taking place, he sent 3 documents to the other councils, and then the government of Canada complained basically that they did not have time to review the documents with the witnesses. And that they needed time during the break to review the document. So Brendan Miller had to refrain himself from cross-examining Michael Keenan and Christopher Dea at first, and had to do it. I think he was the third one to do it.
I mean, that's incredible. To be entirely honest, I had to step away momentarily. So I'm very sad to have missed Miller time today, the second time around at least, because I mean, for the most part, we've seen really Rillo has been very impartial. But what I've noticed lately, and let me know if you agree with me on this or not, but it seems like recently there's been a lot of like cutting back time or not being as lenient, I've noticed, with providing convoy corp lawyer Brendan Miller with a little bit of additional time, where he's been very lenient in a lot of other situations with the other lawyers and granting them 5, sometimes 10 minutes or more, I've noticed. So what do you think about that?
Well, you know what I found surprising is that the government of Canada has no issue, once again, sending 3,000 documents to the other council.
Like, that's crazy.
On Remembrance Day. But they have a lot of trouble receiving 3 documents that, from my understanding, were already made to the public. they were open sources documents.
Mhm.
They had trouble with this 3 document. They were totally fine with sending 3,000 of them. And they claimed that this was breaching the rules, that this was breaking the rules, what Brendan Miller said. So I thought it was a little bit hypocritical, and I thought it was a little bit funny. All right, let's go to a quick ad break. When we come back, we'll go further into today's testimony, and we'll continue to discuss, well, this joke that is the Emergencies Act inquiry. Let's take a quick break.
Freedom in the year 2022, for me, folks, it means the return of Rebel Live. Now, Rebel Live is an annual event we used to put on before the man, or was it the COVID Karen, made us shut it down during the pandemic years. It is a freedom fun fest, if you will. All the freedom fighters you've grown to know and love over the years, they're going to be speaking at the Toronto and Calgary events. The Toronto event is on November 19th. That's a Saturday, and it will feature the likes of Dr. Julie Ponesse, Archer Pawlowski, Tamara Leach, and all your favorite rebels, including yours truly. I'll be the MC that day, Sheila Gunn Reid, and of course, the big boss man himself, Ezra Levant. Now Saturday, November the 26th, we're bringing Rebel Live to Calgary, and those aforementioned speakers will be there, and Sheila will be the MC for that event. You don't want to miss it. It's an all-day freedom fest. I know there are certain would-be conservative leaders that think freedom is overrated. You know, we don't think that way. I don't think you think that way. So if you want to get a ticket, please go to the website. They are going fast. Go to rebelnewslive.com. That's rebelnewslive.com. Get your orders in, and as Billy Red Lions used to say, folks, don't you dare miss it.
Don't you dare miss this one.
All right, we are back. Our apologies for the little technical difficulties. So where were we at? What were you saying?
Well, I was just talking about how DOJ is dumping documents on us, and then I couldn't talk anymore because they're keeping us up late at night all day, all the time. And then, like we were saying, is even one of the documents that Brendan wanted to cross-examine on today was delivered to us today. And then they're saying you're breaching the rules by doing this late. And it's like, it's a lose-lose situation for us here.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a tactic that organizations, unfortunately, like the DOJ does.
Wait, so one of the documents that they were complaining about having received too late from you guys, they sent it today. And then they complained about you not sending it in advance.
Well, maybe that wasn't the one specific they were talking about, because that would be a little bit silly.
I see.
But there were a couple other ones at the same time that just were put together. So I don't think that they were arguing specifically about that one, but the other ones that, and they were just a bit more resource based. It wasn't, it wasn't a secret hidden document. It was a public document to help contextualize the questions. So the fact that they take offense on this, it's just a bit silly. Again, I'm just going to use that word so it's a bit more professional.
I think it's a nicer word than others would use. Just before we let you go, I feel like from Michael Keane's testimony, apart from a cross-examination by Brendan Miller, it's my opinion that we didn't hear a lot of things in relation to the invocation of the Emergencies Act in terms of why it was necessary to invoke it or why it was unnecessary to invoke it. I don't know what you think of that, but can you give us a quick rundown of your general impression of Michael Keane's and Christopher J.'s testimony?
Yeah, well, like I was saying, there was just a lot of fear talked about, and fiction and not fact is where I'm going with it. So there was a lot of discussions about how investors may have worried about it. And in the end, like, I think they were there because of the economic impacts. But again, under cross-examination, it was clear that, and, using a little bit of common sense, you would think that a protest of a few days with a few trucks are not going to cause massive disruption. How about closing down the country for 2 years? How about an ArriveCan app that the US doesn't use? How about look at what's actually causing the problem rather than throwing and pointing fingers at a few people that are just frustrated with the government.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. It really, I mean, Arrive Can is huge, and to only be talking about it at this point in regards to the borders, and it's really it's a miracle, like I said, that this is going on still. Like it really is. It's a big blame game, and I'm tired of hearing these bullies. Like honestly though, like it seems like, in a way, it's my opinion, like some of the people that have testified were, let's say it was purposeful to invoke the Emergencies Act without any necessary evidence that would actually provide a reasonable reason to use that invocation of the Emergencies Act. But let's say it was purposeful, right? So it looks like, to me, in my opinion, that we have some people that were probably in on it, and some people that were bullied and maybe did or didn't consent to being a part of it. And some people that, like today, I was like, why are you telling me about your job description? I don't care what your job is. I cared what part you played in the invocation of the Emergencies Act at the public inquiry that we are here to understand of whether or not this was necessary for literally hours. I mean, there's just a few times I just sit back in my chair and I was like, whoa. Yeah, this is crazy. This is really crazy.
Yeah, I think it happens to all of us. And as we said, if none of them had any clues about threshold of Section 2 of the CSIS Act,
wasn't that provided in their initial statement? And the commission's like, yeah, let's hear you for hours, actually, though, and give cross-examination lawyers 3 seconds to counter your 5 hours of speaking.
And not only that, if it's only CSIS again, talk to it. Why isn't it only CSIS that's testifying? I think it's pretty funny to think about it that way. But anyways, that's where we're at. And I think there's a few things that you said that is going to be great for us to talk about later. Thanks so much for coming on, Ev. I hope that you're feeling better right now. And I look forward to having you on again.
Yeah.
DOJ, stop throwing documents at us.
All right.
Shout out. You hear that?
Great.
Shout out.
Let's throw to clip number 3. A clip of what was said today in relation to Marco Mendicino and the Coutts border blockade. Let's take a look at that.
So in the email that we showed you earlier, which we don't need to pull up again, but is the email where you advise Minister Mendicino in regards to the Coutts port of entry. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you also advised him that at 11:05 p.m. local time on February 14th, the RCMP had successfully cleared and opened the north and southbound roads at the Pacific Highway for the resumption of traffic. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so the traffic flow resumed, and there were very few protesters remaining on site, which is what you advised him of.
Yes.
Right, you reopened on February 14th, but because the protesters had cleared on February 13th.
That's correct.
Right.
Honestly, his testimony, we didn't hear a lot. We didn't hear a lot of things in relation to the Emergencies Act directly that would justify or prove that the Emergencies Act was necessary to be used from neither of their testimony.
No, and I remember saying that a lot too today. I was like, there's so many points, you guys, where I was like, both of us, it was like, we know this already. Why are we talking about this? Why are we asking questions when we've either confirmed these people's statements? I mean, prior to, obviously, everyone got to see them. So why are we still asking these questions that we know the answers to?
Yeah.
Why are we going over details we've already confirmed that we already know about? Why aren't we talking to people that will actually provide us some answers? And again, just like we were talking about with Eva, if CSIS is the only intelligence body in Canada that can determine whether or not the invocation of the Emergencies Act is okay, this whole thing should have been CSIS from the beginning.
Yeah,
really.
It's pretty funny when you actually think about that. Like, if they're the only ones that can actually say whether or not it was justified. I mean, I don't believe, well, as Eva said, it is just that. But if you look at Section 2 of the CSIS Act, it has to be a threat to national security. That can include espionage or sabotage.
Yeah.
That can include, as we saw earlier, intent of committing violence or, plotting to commit violence, inciting someone to have the intent of committing violence. It's all things that we're able to find in a public record. But yeah, it's pretty funny when you think about it. If CISA is the only one that can actually tell you about the Emergencies Act, why aren't they the only one testifying? And there's another thing that Eva touched on, it that you touched on as well, the ArriveCan app, a disastrous app. I think that the
100%.
conspirators are now calling the app the Arrive Scam app.
Or Arrive can't.
Yeah, it is a disastrous app that was installed by Justin Trudeau's Liberal government. And we saw earlier, I'm not sure if you were there, but we saw earlier during Brandon Miller's cross-examination, there were American officials that were saying that they were worried about the impact the ArriveCan app would have on cross-border or on cross-country trade.
Well, no kidding.
The US officials did not want the ArriveCan app, and the ArriveCan app caused a lot of traffic, a lot of difficulties when it came to trading between Canada and the United States. It wasn't just the truckers, it was the ArriveCan app.
No, 100%. It was a huge conglomerate of mess ups from all three divisions of the Canadian government. And then when you bring in a foreign government, we've got our neighbors, right? We got people from the US, we have officials there trying to figure out what's going on. And our government can't seem to get it together, won't even talk to the people that are literally proclaiming their discomfort, their distaste, and all the horrendous things that we all went through them. Yeah, we really did. And so to pretend like there's nothing wrong and you have no idea why there's a massive public outcry going on in your country is the most ignorant thing that I've ever witnessed. And this inquiry is a direct reflection of that.
Oh, for sure.
Why are all these people testifying if they have no part in the invocation of the Emergencies Act? Really, what is this at the end of the day? What is this?
Yeah, well, no.
Like, 100%. Are we here to find that out instead? Like,
yeah. And Brandon Miller was the only one that I found was actually putting out relevant information today. You had him. Honestly, the documents that he put out were extremely interesting documents. And when we talk about the borders and Brandon Miller, it brings us to clip number 4, Miller time, where the former president of the Canadian Border Service Agency told the commission that the CBSA, this agency, did not receive any info about threats to Canada from the U.S. Intel Agency during the Freedom Convoy protest. Let's take a look at clip number 4.
It's fair to say that throughout the protest, and at least based on the disclosure, the agencies in the United States, such as the FBI, et cetera, they did not provide the CBSA or the Five Eyes any form of information with respect to any threat to Canada. Is that fair?
I wouldn't be aware of that exactly. I think you'd probably better talk to those like Communications Security Establishment and or CSIS to find that out.
Right, but nothing was brought to your attention as the president of the CBSA with respect to any sort of threat to Canada coming from the United States during the protest. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Right. And so, of course, you never relayed such information to Cabinet or to any of the political executive because you weren't given any.
I believe that to be true, yes.
And it's fair to say that
even if it shows... All right, are we back on? Perfect. Even if it shows that he had no clue whether he had no authority to determine whether or not it was actually met, the threshold was actually met.
He knew that. You could hear it. He's like, I have no part in this, dude.
Yeah, but no one told him that it was. No CSIS agent, no CSIS official told him, as the former president of the CBSA, not a single CSIS official told him that the threshold was met. Not a single one.
Are you surprised? I'm not surprised. I bet none of you guys are surprised either. I mean, you can even hear it in his voice. He's like,
yeah.
Really, I feel like if I can analyze his tonality as well as his micro expressions and his body language, the way he's answering the question so point blank without even needing to think about what comes out of his mouth, he seriously is like, I was left out of this. I have no idea why I'm here. Why I'm providing this testimony. You know this information. CSIS determined that there wasn't a threat well before the Emergencies Act was invoked. So
no, all
it's very frustrating.
Yeah, all the relevant questions actually related to the Emergencies Act that were asked by Brandon Miller. They all seem to have trouble answering them straightly today. Brandon often asked, what's the name of the second witness? A deputy minister.
What, from the second testimony?
Yeah, Transport Canada.
Oh, Michael
Keenan.
Yeah.
Brendan Miller often asked Michael Keenan about straight yes or no questions, and he could never give a straight yes or no answer. I think it tells a lot, but it reminded me of something, and I think we can find a clip easily. We played it from yesterday's live stream. Yesterday, Brenda Lucky also had trouble answering Brendan Miller's question properly. She had trouble answering them. Brendan Miller would ask her questions specifically about the RCMP, and she had no clue how to answer them. But she was able to answer a virtue signaling woke question about how they are inclusive to BIPOC people, how they are inclusive to minority people.
Yeah, and
she was able. It was her
systemic,
lengthiest answer.
yeah, systemic racism in Canada.
Yeah, that's the only long answer that she was actually able to give.
Yeah, at one point I also recall she was being asked a question. It wasn't even by Brendan Miller. She was being asked a question, and you could tell she didn't like the direction it was going into, but it wasn't her job to say, where are we going with this? That's usually something that the lawyers will impose. Her counsel would impose if they believe that the line of questioning from the lawyer cross-examining her was out of line. And she herself said it. You remember this. Is that correct? Yeah, you remember that happening? I was very shocked. I was like, it's your job to be up there, provide your testimony, and answer questions to the best of your ability. You've answered nothing to the best of your ability, and that's been the most comprehensible thing that I can take away from this is that we have a leader in policing that is so incompetent that she can't even answer questions directly. I know we weren't really going to bring it back to that, but like seriously, when you're only answering woke questions that promote an agenda and you spend 2 minutes on it, and you could recall your bedtime, but you could recall who was at very specific meetings. Here we go. We can take a look at this clip. Take a look.
And are you aware of dynamics of systemic racism and specifically anti-Indigenous discrimination in policing and responding to public order or emergency events?
As a result of the Ipperwash, in regards to the Ipperwash report?
No, just broadly within the RCMP. Are you aware of dynamics of systemic racism and policing of Indigenous peoples?
We are doing a lot of initiatives within the RCMP in regards to systemic racism. We've introduced some new courses that we've actually made available to all police agencies, Uniting Against Racism, Cultural Awareness and Humility courses, we're updating our curriculums at our training academy. We've also have the blanket exercise that is at our training academy, and that is available for all employees of the RCMP. And it's all about, and we've reviewed our whole recruiting process to make sure there's no systemic barriers to prevent Indigenous people, but also the BIPOC community into entering into the RCMP. In our recruiting, we're trying to be more progressive in our proactive recruiters so that we would be able to have more Indigenous people in the RCMP, because it's more representative of the communities we serve. And I think it would strengthen our organization to have more Indigenous people as police officers in the RCMP, so we can connect with those communities. We do try to have people that are Indigenous to go to Indigenous communities that can assist us, but also, we do have a higher than average percentage in the government for Indigenous employees, but it's not very high in general. It's at about 7%. And I think we need to have, I think if we had a greater diversity within our organization, it would bode well for working in Indigenous communities, working with Indigenous people on protecting their, rights and allowing them peaceful protest.
Okay.
I haven't seen her give an answer that long throughout her whole testimony.
Yeah, like we didn't even get through the whole clip last night because we didn't get through the whole clip last night if you saw that live stream. So you can see so blatantly that it was it's been her choice in how she answers questions. I don't believe for a second that this woman is forgetting basic information. I don't think for a moment that she's not able to recall basic details from her day-to-day as a police officer, as the commission of the RCMP, but she will go on for more than 2 minutes consecutively to talk about another thing that promotes the woke left agenda. What is your take on that?
Well, to the contrary of you, I do believe that she's able to because she's incompetent and we saw that she's incompetent. So I don't have any trouble believing her when she says she doesn't remember anything because it's not surprising. But one thing that she said before, it shows how weak she is as a leader.
For sure.
And here's one thing. She answered my questions. She answered media questions. She answered tough questions.
Yeah.
Justin Trudeau, my favorite minister, Omar Al-Jabra, are not even able to answer simple questions by Rebel News. But this weak leader was able to answer our questions. So what does this say about Justin Trudeau?
I don't even have an answer because all of this is honestly so crazy. Like you would never think that this would actually be happening right now. Like in a perfect world, you have politicians that, I mean, why do you become a politician? Is it not to serve? Is it not to be of service to the people that you are supposed to govern? I think that involves talking to them, but they do their job so well that they don't only not answer our questions as Rebel Media, but they also just won't talk to protesters that go against the narratives that they're promoting. So,
talking about Al-Jabra, there's a clip that I sent later on, the clip number 8. Al-Jabra was brought up during Brandon Miller's cross-examination. I think that he pronounced Omar Al-Jabra's name properly during his cross-examination. I think he did. He had some trouble with Marco Mendocino, but I think he pronounced Omar's name properly. Al-Jabra came up during the cross-examination. Clip number 8. Let's take a look at that. Clip number 8. All right. Well, it's one of the clips that I sent.
The email to the following people, and that's to Minister Mendocino, the Minister of Public Safety. You know who he is?
Yes, I do.
And he also forwards it to Minister Al-Gawra, the Minister of Transport.
I know Minister Al-Gawra well.
Right, and he's the minister that you report to.
Yes.
Right. And he didn't pass this on to you?
To my memory and knowledge, he did not pass this on to me.
Right, but as the Deputy Minister of Transport, as the highest essentially civil servant within that ministry, isn't this sort of information something important that you should know?
I think you have to understand the context. Transport Canada, the Minister of Transport gets a massive amount of correspondence. I get a massive amount of correspondence on something like this, on an exchange between an MP and the minister. I may or may not see it depending upon the nature and the context.
That's all organized our government is. That's how organized our government officials are. This man is basically the second one right after Omar Al-Jabra. He's the highest ranking official, one of the highest ranking officials
deputy
after
minister,
Omar Al-Jabra. And Omar Al-Jabra did not provide to him important information about transportation. And guess who he is? The Deputy Minister of Transportation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a deputy minister, that's supposed to be your right-hand man. You know what I mean? Like in that position, you're really there to be of assistance in any way, shape, or form that you can to the minister that you are serving under. And when information like that isn't passed on, that's like not being CC'd on like any relevant info of that pertains to yourself. It's like an email chain going on at work, and you are exclusively cut out of a huge decision going forward. It's either done blatantly out of respect to their disorganization, or they're just that disorganized. And I really don't know which is worse at this point, really.
Yeah, well, that's my thing as well. Is it incompetency or malice? Is it incompetency or just bad intentions?
Well, the ministers, it's like they're running a cool kids club. You have all the ministers that are just like, like laughing. They're like, look at what we're doing. This is great. They're the ones that this is all pointing to. And again, I sound like a broken record when I say this, but really, we've gotten down to the bottom of it. Every intelligence agency in Canada has provided their input on the fact that the Emergencies Act was not necessary to invoke, not at all. In fact, there were so many different degrees in which the policing institutions could have gone and already used the tools that were within their legislative powers, and they hit the panic button. So I think it's more, I lean towards malice. Really, you can't be in those positions and be that ignorant. There's no way. There's really no way. Is there? How is this happening?
I don't know. I try to keep a nice nicer mind than yours.
Yeah.
I try to assume that it's not Moss. I try to assume that they do have the best intentions. They're just
The ministers?
well, the ministers, Brenda Lucky, deputy minister.
No, I'm talking about like the liberal ministers,
Yeah.
like Al Jabra,
Mendicino, yeah.
Mendicino, and
He didn't pronounce Al Gabra's name right. I think he said Al Jabra.
yeah,
Something
but
like
the
that.
other guy retorted the same.
Yeah, anyway, it's always very funny. All right, let's take a look at clip number 6 of our great government officials talking about the Coutts border blockade and how, according to them, it was one of the biggest things to affect the economy of Canada, even though we were all locked up for 2 years due to who? Justin Trudeau. Let's take a look at that.
The concerns you outlined, Mr. Keenan, about Canada's reputation and attracting investment, was that more top of mind than the importation of critical goods? What was most important in your mind at that time?
I think both were really important. The importation of critical goods is a here and now problem that puts the health and safety of Canadians at risk. And the investment confidence is a future economic prospects issue that puts future really good, high-paying jobs at risk. And both of them are important.
The concerns
I don't know if
you
you
outlined,
remember, but when this started, when this whole thing started, and even back in February, Chrystia Freeland said that due to the Freedom Convoy, due to the blockades, foreign investor would have trouble trusting Canada as a place to invest their money. He basically just said the exact same thing. I didn't notice it until now. She said that. But in my opinion, I think that blocking your whole country, locking down your people for 2 straight years is even worse for the economy than blocking those border crossings for merely 2 weeks. And we saw that even if some of them were blocked, other ones had a bigger influx than they usually do. So even though one was blocked by and the influx was reduced by 8%,
Yeah.
all of the other rounds around it got up.
Well, that's just the thing, right? So no one is talking about those things. Like we shouldn't even be getting into these details again if we're here to just understand if the Emergencies Act should have been invoked or not. But when they're bringing in all these other details, it does draw the mind towards even questioning further than that. So when you bring up the fact that obviously there would have been large economic impacts from locking down a country for 2 years, I mean, myself alone, the amount of small businesses that I personally know that closed down. Again, who stayed open? The large chain corporations like Walmart, we had Costco's, liquor depots, etc., that all remained open. And so at that point, there's bound to be some sort of implication, but they're not talking about those things. They're just trying to point fingers, and it's really, really ridiculous.
Yeah, totally. You know, before I would say that the ones that I am the most excited to hear about is the Liberal cabinet. Before I would say, you know, the one I'm extremely excited to hear about Justin Trudeau. I'm extremely excited to hear about Chrystia Freeland, and I think in a certain way I still am. But the ones now that I'm truly the most excited to hear about are CSIS officials. Because everyone is putting the blame on CSIS. Oh, well, they are the ones that could have known. They're the ones that should have known. They're the ones that could have told us.
And they said it point blank in the beginning.
And I'm sure the cabinet is going to say the same thing. But when we hear CSIS officials say their testimony, and some of it will be blocked due to the in-camera ex parte ruling by Commissioner Rouleau. But when we hear them, we will actually see, okay, well, was it a threat to national security? Was it actually necessary to invoke the Emergencies Act? Because they're the ones that can tell you if it's a threat to national security. You know, for those that don't know what CSIS is, I did a video about it recently, but basically CSIS is the same thing as the FBI in the United States, but CSIS is in Canada. Is Canada's anti-terrorism agency, essentially.
The largest Canadian intelligence agency that we have.
So they're truly the ones who are going to be able to say whether or not the Emergencies Act was necessary due to the convoy.
And again, they did. Like they did, and we heard this very early on. The OPS, the OPP, the RCMP, they all received the same intelligence reports. The OPS, OPP, WPS, all of the policing agencies that were at the time on the ground, they all reported the same thing as well, that they didn't think that there was an actual threat
Yeah, we're seeing it in the evidence.
Well, yeah, and there wasn't a threat at the blockades, the borders, 360, the whole thing, all the way around. There was no threat that could be detected.
Yeah, no, it's actually incredible when you think about it, that we have all of these witnesses. I think today's the first time that I actually caught on that. We have all of these witnesses that keep putting the blame on CSIS, that keep saying, well, it's CSIS' responsibility to know that. Why don't we just cut the inquiry from 6 weeks to 1 week and just interrogate all of the CSIS official? Why don't we just do that?
No, you get the top, you get the 1 day. So all you need is 1 day. You get the top rated CSIS representative in the same room as Justin Trudeau, Mendocino, and Aljabra. And boom, you figure it out right then and there. Because I think all direction is going to point towards those ministers, not CSIS. CSIS said it from the beginning. They did their job. They instructed the police the best of their ability. As far as I'm concerned, that's my opinion. Let us know in the comments if you think differently. But through the evidence, we saw that they were able to provide the intel that was needed and that was necessary. Ministers still chose different, didn't even instruct their deputy ministers on what was
that's what I was
going
going
on.
to say.
So boom,
yeah,
right there.
A lack of communication. I think another mandate from the commission, I think a lot of people forget about this, including myself sometime. Another mandate from the commission is to provide suggestions on how to act better in the future. So I look forward to seeing the suggestions that come out of Justice Rouleau's decision at the end.
We're gonna see if he remains impartial. Again, he has so far, but the more that we get into this, you guys, the more we realize that we've been going in circles. And if we can figure that out, I am certain that Commissioner Rouleau has also figured that out. So
of course,
let's see what he says. Let's see what he does going forward.
Yeah, and CSIS is going to be next week. So next week is going to be interesting. We have the cabinet ministers and we have CSIS. I was sure it was going to be this week.
For last. I mean,
yeah.
Goodness.
No, for sure. All right. Well, we're already an hour in. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Just one announcement before we leave. This Saturday, Rebel News live event in Toronto. If you want to meet Tamara Leach, if you want to meet Sheila Gunreed, a lot of other personalities, Derek Fildebrand, and a lot of other rebels, you can go to rebelnewslive.com and you can purchase your tickets for this Saturday, November 19th. And not only this Saturday, but next weekend.
Next weekend on the 26th of November, we'll also be in Calgary, where there will be another Rebel Live event being held there. Again, you can also purchase those tickets. You'll be able to hear from your favorite people. Again, Tamara Leach will be there. We've got people from Rebel News. We have even Andrew Lawton from the True North, as well as our friend, the Western Standard, Derek Fildebrand. I will be at both events. We'll be there in Toronto as well this weekend coming up. So we hope to see you there.
Of course. Yeah, definitely look forward to seeing you there. If you guys want to purchase your ticket, it is rebelnewslive.com. Super easy, rebelnewslive.com. Thank you for being here, Celine. Thank you to Eva, who's already left. And I look forward to seeing all of you guys tomorrow.
Freedom in the year 2022, for me, folks, it means the return of Rebel Live. Now, Rebel Live is an annual event we used to put on before the man, or was it the COVID Karen, made us shut it down during the pandemic years. It is a freedom fun fest, if you will. All the freedom fighters you've grown to know and love over the years, they're going to be speaking at the Toronto and Calgary events. The Toronto event is on November 19th. That's a Saturday, and it will feature the likes of Dr. Julie Ponesse, Archer Pawlowski, Tamara Leach, and all your favorite rebels, including yours truly. I'll be the MC that day, Sheila Gunreed, and of course, the big boss man himself, Ezra Levant. Now Saturday, November the 26th, we're bringing Rebel Live to Calgary, and those aforementioned speakers will be there, and Sheila will be the MC for that event. You don't want to miss it. It's an all-day freedom fest. I know there are certain would-be conservative leaders that think freedom is overrated. You know, we don't think that way. I don't think you think that way. So if you want to get a ticket, please go to the website. They are going fast. Go to rebelnewslive.com. That's rebelnewslive.com. Get your orders in, and as Billy Red Lions used to say, folks, don't you dare miss it.
Don't you dare miss this one.